Good evening, everyone. So today we're continuing through Judges, starting in chapter 10. So after Abimelech, we did those ones. We're going to go down to 10:6. The Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, worshiping the Baals and the Ashtaroths, the god of Aram, the gods of Sidon, the god of Moab, the gods of the Amorites, and the gods of the Philistines. Thus they abandoned the Lord and did not worship him. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and into the hands of the Amorites. And they crushed and oppressed the Israelites that year. For 18 years they oppressed all the Israelites who were beyond the Jordan in the land of the Amorites, while in Gilead. The Amorites also crossed the Jordan to fight against Judah and against Benjamin and against the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was greatly distressed. So here you're seeing how the divisions are coming in Israel. So you have the tribes beyond the Jordan and the tribes on the other side. That's why they kind of wanted to avoid that in general, but you're seeing that it's already causing a schism between the groups. And then you have Judah and Benjamin. Benjamin is small and it's kind of absorbed by Judah. And they're in the south, and then the house of Ephraim. So you're already seeing that, like, those are the poles, that there's a power in the north and a power in the south. So the Israelites cried to the Lord, saying, "We have sinned against you, because we have abandoned our God and have worshipped the Baals." And the Lord said to the Israelites, "Did I not deliver you from the Egyptians and from the Amorites and from the Philistines? The Sidonians also, and the Amalekites, and the Maonites oppressed you, and you cried to me, and I delivered you out of their hand. Yet you have abandoned me and worshipped other gods. Therefore I will deliver you no more. Go and cry to the gods whom you have chosen. Let them deliver you in the time of your distress." And the Israelites said to the Lord, "We have sinned. Do to us whatever seems good to you, but deliver us this day." So they put away the foreign gods among them and worshipped the Lord, and he could no longer bear to see Israel suffer. So this is, again, like the author is personifying God. And so this isn't meant to be like God appeared before all of Israel and said these words. It's like, no, this is what we're seeing. And so this is how we are expressing this truth, that when we tend to worship these guys, we fall astray and we get absorbed and we get oppressed. When we worship the Lord and we have a rejuvenation, then it comes back, and then we'll be able to do it. And you see, like, cultural shifts. This is talking about cultural shifts going back and forth. So they're personifying it as a dialogue, but it's not meant to be seen directly as that dialogue. Now Jephthah the Gileadite, the son of a prostitute, was a mighty warrior. Gilead was the father of Jephthah. Gilead's wife also bore him sons. And when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah away, saying to him, "You shall not inherit anything in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." Then Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob. Outlaws collected around Jephthah, and they raided with him. After a time, the Ammonites made war against Israel, and when the Ammonites made war against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to bring Jephthah from the land of Tob. They said to Jephthah, "Come, be our commander, so that we may fight with the Amorites." But Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "You are not the very ones who rejected me and drove me out of my father's house, so why do you come to me now when you are in trouble?" The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "Nevertheless, we have now turned back to you, so that you may go with us and fight with the Ammonites, and become head over us, over all the inhabitants of Gilead." Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "If you bring me home again to fight with the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them over to me, I will be your head." And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "The Lord be our witness between us. We will surely do as you say." So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and commander over them. And Jephthah spoke all his words before the Lord at Mizpah. Then Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites and said, "What is there between you and me, that you have come to me to fight against my land?" The king of the Ammonites answered the messenger of Jephthah, "Because Israel, on coming from Egypt, took away my land from the Aran to Jabbok and to the Jordan, now therefore restore it peaceably." Once again Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites and said to him, "Thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab or the land of the Ammonites, but when they came up from Egypt, Israel went through the wilderness to the Red Sea and came to Kadesh. Israel then sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, "Let us pass through your land." But the king of Edom would not listen. They also sent to the king of Moab, but he would not consent. So Israel remained at Kadesh. Then they journeyed through the wilderness, went around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, arrived in the eastern side of the land of Moab, and camped on the other side of the Aran. They did not enter the territory of Moab, for their Arnon was the boundary of Moab. Israel then sent messengers to King Sihon and the Amorites, king of Heshbon, and Israel said to him, "Let us pass through your land to our country." But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory. So Sihon gathered all his people together and encamped at Jahaz, fought with Israel. Then the Lord, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they defeated them. So Israel occupied all the land of the Ammonites, who inhabited the country. They occupied all the territory of the Ammonites, from the Arnon of the Jabbok, and from the wilderness to the Jordan. So now the Lord, the God of Israel, has conquered the Ammonites for the benefit of his people Israel. Do you intend to take their place? Should you not possess what your God Shemoth gives you to possess? And should we not be the ones to possess everything that the Lord our God has conquered for our benefit? Note, now, are you any better than the king Balak, son of Zippor of Moab? Did he ever enter into conflict with Israel, or did he ever go to war with them? While Israel lived in Heshbon and its villages, and in Arior and its villages, and all the towns that are along the Arnon, for 300 years, why did you not recover them within that time? It is now I who have sinned against you, but you are the one who does me wrong by making war on me. Let the Lord, who is judge, decide today for the Israelites or the Ammonites. But the king of the Ammonites did not heed the message of Jephthah sent him. Okay, that was a lot. But what the key is, so we're having this, Jephthah is an interesting character because he's kind of like, it's that one line that Jesus says, like, make friends with dishonest wealth. And he's an interesting character because he's kind of like an outlaw, and he's the son of a prostitute. It's, again, God using weird people and unusual outcasts to prove his will, but he's willing to stand up for the Lord. So he has to know. He's like, well, I'm going to stand up for the Lord. I'm going to stand up for my people. And so now you have these Ammonites. Well, you took our land 300 years ago, and it's that question of who has the right to what. And so, that's still very, very alive today, not just in Israel, where you see like the Palestinians and Israelites and all these other kind of people arguing about who has the right. And, in our own country with the Native Americans, where you're like, okay, well, this tribe was here when we conquered them, but they had conquered it from another tribe, and vice versa, and going back hundreds of years. So it's whenever you try to get into that, it gets real messy real quick. So who has the right? I don't know. So Jephthah is saying, well, we're here now, and our God's defending us, and we're going to do it. So either come and take it, and we'll see which God is stronger, kind of thing. So it's not making a moral claim one way or the other so much as just trying to say, like, well, we're here now. There's not much we can do. God delivered this land into us, so we can't do anything else. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh. He passed on to Mizpah and Gilead, and from Mizpah of Gilead he passed on to the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord. He said, "If you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whoever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return victorious from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's, to be offered up to me as a burnt offering." So this is, okay, well, let me finish the paragraph. So Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord gave them into his hand. He inflicted a massive defeat on them from Arior in the neighborhood to the Minnith, 20 towns, and as far as Abel-Keram. So the Ammonites were subdued before the Lord of Israel. So Jephthah makes a very foolhardy thing. He says, okay, if the first person I see come out my doors is I'm going to offer up to the Lord in sacrifice. Like, when did God ask for that? The only time we've seen God ask for that was Abraham and Isaac, and he stopped him from doing it. So this is actually kind of seeing the influence of the other gods in doing. Some of the other gods have human sacrifice, like Molech for the Ammonites, but not the Lord. That has never been a tradition in the Lord. And so when you have this, then the question becomes, okay, well now why are we doing this? You're seeing the pagan influences. And so this is a foolhardy vow that he makes. When Jephthah came in his house at Mizpah, and there was his daughter coming out to meet him with timbrels and with dancing, she was his only child. He had no son or daughter except her. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low. You have become the cause of great trouble for me." Who did you think was going to come out of your house? It was going to be somebody close to you. Again, this is meant to be that kind of ironic punishment of don't make hasty vows, don't offer to God something he doesn't want. Kind of again like the offering of Cain and Abel. Abel made a good offering, Cain made a bad offering. It's not just the offering, it's what we offer, how we offer it. "For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow." She said to him, "My father, if you have opened your mouth to the Lord, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth. Now the Lord has given you vengeance against your enemies, the Ammonites." And she said to her father, "Let this thing be done to me. Grant me 2 months, so that I may go and wander on the mountains and bewail my virginity, my companions and I." "Go," he said, and sent her away for 2 months. So she departed, she and her companions, and bewailed her virginity on the mountains. At the end of 2 months she returned to her father, who did with her according to the vow he had made. Again, it's his vow. It's not the Lord. The Lord never asked for that. So there arose in Israelite custom that for 4 days every year the daughters of Israel would go out to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. So it's also an explanation for this type of festival kind of thing. "The men of Ephraim were called to arms, and they crossed the Zaphron and said to Jephthah, 'Why did you cross over to fight against the Ammonites, and did not call us to go with you? We will burn your house down over you.' Jephthah said to them, 'My people and I were engaged in conflict with the Ammonites, who oppressed us severely. But when I called you, you did not deliver me from their hand. When I saw that you would not deliver me, I took my life into my hands and crossed over against the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into my hand. Why then have you come up to me on this day to fight against me?' Then Jephthah gathered all his men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. And the men of Gilead defeated Ephraim, because they said, 'You are fugitives from Ephraim, you Gileadites, in the heart of Ephraim and Manasseh.' Then the Gileadites took the fords of the Jordan against the Ephraimites. Whenever one of the fugitive of Ephraim said, 'Let me go over,' the men of Gilead would say to them, 'Are you an Ephraimite?' When he said, 'No,' they said to him, 'Then say Shibboleth.' and he would say, Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it right. Then they seized him and killed him at the fords of the Jordan. 42,000 of Ephraimites fell at the time. Jephthah judged Israel for 6 years. Then Jephthah and the Gilead died and was buried in his town in Gilead. So now we're seeing that the division, again, that we saw sprinkled at and that is now becoming stronger. So the whole idea with them when they're seizing the things, so they're in kind of a little bit of a civil war, they're related, but now they're starting to split apart culturally. And this is symbolized by that the languages are starting to shift. So this one says it this way, this word this way, this one says it the other way, so they know they're from this different region. So that's showing that cultural shift, that they've been separated, and so they're not unified as they've been called to be, which was always the fear when they're worshiping other gods and different things like that, that God is calling them to be one. And of course that's a petty thing to be arguing about. It's not the language itself, but how often in our own world do we let petty things come in and divide us when we should be united, whether that's as Americans or as Catholics or as Christians or as just decent human beings, but we have let all race, politics, all these little overall minor things separate us, and so we can see that this is still part of who we are. Hopefully we don't take it to the extreme of Jephthah and Ephraim where they go into civil war with it, but you can see this is just part of human beings tend to fragment, and we're all having that call to be united, like our new bishop's Episcopal phrase, which is that all might be one. After him, Ibaz of Bethlehem judged Israel. He had 30 sons. He gave his 30 daughters in marriage outside his clan and brought in 30 young women from outside for his sons. He judged Israel for 7 years. Then Ibaz died and was buried in Bethlehem. So just the first message of Bethlehem. And this is also, remember, Beth means house and Hem is bread. So this is house of bread. After him, Elon the Zebulunite judged Israel, and he judged Israel for 10 years. Then Elon the Zebulunite died and was buried in Ajalon in the land of Zebulun. After him, Abdon, son of Hillel, with a Pithriite, judged Israel. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys. He judged Israel for 8 years. Then Abdon, son of Hillel, the Pirathite, died and was buried at Pirathion in the land of Ephraim, in the hill country of the Amalekites. So again, these middle ones, this is kind of like those genealogies we have, and part of them is to again, have that tradition and that history, but it's also to show that time is passing, so that you can see that it isn't just like Shamgar, and then go straight to Ehud, that this is supposed to be generational. So we're seeing that the time is passing, and so that this is a period of time. This isn't meant to be just like 10 years or something. No, this is a whole period. Like this is like in the United States, the colonial period, where you have the figureheads, but they might not actually interact, but they symbolize that time period. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. So the Philistines will be one of the bigger traditional enemies that will be around, and they're centered around what is today modern-day Gaza. The modern term Palestine comes from Philistine, and they're the same terminology, and it comes from when the Romans came in and took over. They were like, what are the people here? They didn't want to call it Israel or Judea because they didn't want to do it, so they called it, that's where they came up with Palestine, because that was like the Latinized version of an old word for the area. And so that kind of then got brought back in the modern context with modern Palestinians, which is a modern, only in the last 200 years was that seen as a separate ethnic group, because up until that time they were just seen as Arab or Turkish or some other ones. So it's a term that keeps getting brought back for political reasons and cultural reasons. And it was a very interesting thing because most of the native Christians of Israel are now considered Palestinian. And so, most of them, if you go to Israel, like Palestinians, which in the United States we have some complex traditions with Israel and Palestinians and all that kind of stuff, but most of the ones who run all the Christian shops are all Palestinians. And I got to go when I was there to the Palestinian Roman Catholic diocese that was there for Israel in the region, and so they were Palestinian. So one of the things we talked about was like how it's an interesting to read, because how they read it in the terms, it's like they're reading it as their modern terms brought back. So imagine like if America was named after the great like enemy of Egypt, and you read then Israel fought America, and you know it's not the same America, but it still has that kind of context. And so it's kind of just an interesting, I don't have a major point about that, it's just an interesting political context to how we use terminology and how it shifts and how they come again and again. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren, having borne no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, although you are barren, having borne no children, you shall conceive and bear a son. Now be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, or to eat anything unclean, for you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor is to come on his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite. The Nazarites were like kind of a special group of like, not Amish isn't the right term, but kind of like a special order or kind of that kind of stuff, though. So they were like like an ideology within or group within Israel practice, so a way of practicing. And one of the things is they wouldn't shave their heads, and they would have big braids, which of course will become into very important for Samson. It is he who shall begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Then the woman came and told her husband, a man of God told me, and his appearance was like that of an angel of God, most awe-inspiring. I did not ask him where he came from, and he did not tell me his name. But he said to me, you shall conceive and bear a son, so drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from birth to the day of his death. When Manoah entreated the Lord, and said, O Lord, I pray, let the man of God whom you sent come to us again, and teach us what we are to do concerning the boy who will be born. God listened to Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman as she sat in the field. But her husband Manoah was not with her, so the woman ran quickly and told her husband, the man came to me the other day, has appeared to me. Manoah got up and followed his wife, and came to the man and said to him, are you the man who spoke to this woman? And he said, I am. When Manoah said, now when your words came true, what is to be done with the boy's rule of life? What is he to do? The angel of the Lord said to Manoah, let the woman give heed to all that I have said to her. She may not eat anything that comes from the vine. She is not to drink wine or strong drink, or eat unclean things. She has observed everything that I commanded her. Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, allow us to detain you and prepare a kid for you. The angel of the Lord said to Manoah, if you detain me, I will not eat your food. But if you want to prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to the Lord. For Manoah did not know that he was the angel of the Lord. So he doesn't know if he's a prophet or a man of God or what he is, so he's just trying to figure out and trying to be good to him. Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, what is your name, so that he may honor you when your words come here? But the angel of the Lord said to him, why do you ask my name? It is too wonderful. So Manoah took the kid with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, in him who works wonders. When the flame went up towards heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord ascended to the flame of the altar, while Manoah and his wife looked on, and they fell on their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord did not appear again, and Manoah and his wife, then Manoah realized that it was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, we shall surely die, for we have seen God. But his wife said to him, if the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us all these things, or now announced to us such things as these. The woman bore a son and named him Samson. The boy grew, and the Lord blessed him. The Spirit of the Lord began to stir within Mahanadon between Zorah and Eshtal. So this is another, just like that reminder to us that angels are not wimps. Again, because they're like touched by an angel, if you remember that from like the 90s and stuff, and angels are, they're so nice and other, and we have the little pictures and stuff. Like, no, angels are terrifying. My name is too wonderful for you to understand. It's like too great. It would almost horrify you. Like, they're horrified, they're terrified because of the great awe that they have received from the angel. So and they're just a fraction. They're supposed to be that little reflection of God's power. So remember, like when the angel appeared to Joshua and he was like gleaming bronze. That's how he's described. And so again, this one, like they're otherworldly, and then he ascends with the fire. And so it's all this kind of stuff that you can understand why they're terrified. And it's again a reminder to us that like the God's power is not wimpy. These angels aren't soft little things. No, they're soldiers. They're messengers, but they're soldiers, and they're rightfully terrifying in a good way. In the same way that a bear is terrifying or the Grand Canyon is terrifying. Once Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw a Philistine woman. Then he came up and told his father and mother, "I saw a Philistine woman at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." Well, that's not a good thing. You're supposed to be freeing yourself from the Philistines. You're not supposed to do it. Remember, we don't want to mix with the Philistines. And again, it's not because it's not an ethnic thing. It's a worship thing. You worship a different god. Remember with Jephthah, you're Ammonites. You worship Shethus or whatever it was. So if you're a Philistine, it means you're worshiping a different god, and that's going to be a problem. But his father and mother said to him, "Is there not a woman among your kin, or among all our people, that you must go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines?" But Samson said to his father, "Get her for me, because she pleases me." His father and mother did not know that this was the Lord, for he was seeking a pretext to act against the Philistines. At the time, the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah. When he came to the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion roared at him. The Spirit of the Lord rushed on him, and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as one might tear apart a kid. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. When he went down and talked with a woman, and she pleased Samson. After a while, he returned to marry her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. He scraped it out into his hands and went on, eating as he went. When he came to his father and mother, he gave some to them, and they ate it. But he did not tell them he had taken the honey from the carcass of a lion. Okay, so a couple fun little facts. First of all, you're seeing the strength. So you have the first adventure where he fights the lion and defeats it. Secondly, we do know there were actually lions in Israel. So the former range of like now what we assume is like sub-Saharan Africa and all that kind of like African animals once kind of went through all the Middle East to India. So actually there's native populations of both lions and cheetahs still in India. There's only like a couple hundred left in both areas, but there's actually native cheetahs in India, and that's why there's there's elephant populations in both places. So at one point there were lions. They've since been wiped out due to the shift in the climate and all the other factors and human populations, because we don't really like lions around our sheep, because while we like the symbolism of them, we don't like them eating us and the things we eat. So we tend to kill off the big game things when they're, it's just like, Ohio used to have rattlesnakes and things like that. I'm like, oh, well, I'm okay with us getting rid of all of those. That's fine. We don't need to deal with rattlesnakes. That's fine. So it's another point to do is like, eating something out of a carcass would probably be considered unclean, so that's one of the markers. So he didn't tell his father and mother, partially because we're going to see that becomes part of the riddle later on, but partially because, again, Samson isn't acting terribly like a good Israelite yet, and it's going to kind of come back to him. So he's kind of doing in what he thinks. So he has great promise. He's got this great strength, but he's not necessarily living up to what he should be. His father went down to the woman, and Samson made a feast there, as the young men were accustomed to do. Then the people saw him. They brought 30 companions to be with him. Samson said to them, "Let me now put a riddle to you. If you can explain it to me within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, but then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 festal garments. But if you cannot explain it to me, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 festal garments." Remember that garments and clothing is very, very expensive at the time, so this is a high price. So they said to him, "Ask your riddle and let us hear it." He said to them, "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." But for 3 days they could not explain the riddle. On the 4th day they said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband to explain the riddle to us, or we will burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to be impoverish us?" So Samson's wife wept before them, saying, "You hate me. You do not really love me. You have asked a riddle to my people, but you have not explained it to me." Then he said, "Look, I have not told my father or my mother. Why should I tell you?" She wept before him, and the 7 days the feast lasted. And because she nagged him, on the 7th day he told her. Then she explained the riddle to the people. The men of the town said to him on the 7th day, before the sun went down, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" And he said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle." Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed onto him and went down to Ashkeloth. He killed 30 men of the town, took their spoil, and gave the festal garments to those who had explained the riddle. In hot anger he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. So again, not starting out great. So killing Philistines actually is, that's okay, because they're kind of the bad guys. So in this context, that's not too bad. But like, again, he's kind of a sourpuss. He's like, he's already Humphrey, and again, we're going to see him being weak with women too, that he doesn't have control over himself. So again, great potential, but not getting very good use out of it. After a while, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife, bringing along a kid. So he kind of just leaves her for months at a time, then comes back expecting it to be fine. He said, "I want to go into my wife's room." But her father would not allow him to go in. His father said, "I am sure that you had rejected her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not the younger sister prettier than she? Why not take her instead?" Samson said to them, "This time, when I do mischief to the Philistines, I will be without blame." So Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took some torches, and he turned the foxes' tails to the tail and put a torch between each pair of the tails. Then he had set fire to the torches. He let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and burned up the shocks and the standing grain, as the vineyards and the olive groves. Then the Philistines asked, "Who has done this?" And they said, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite. But he has taken Samson's wife and given her to his companions." So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father. Samson said to them, "If this was what you do, I swear I will not stop until I have taken revenge on you." He struck them down, hip and thigh, with great slaughter, and he went down and lived in the cleft of the rock at Etham. So again, it's a fun story to say, but this is not supposed to be like a moral lesson at this point, except for what not to do. This is, again, kind of like the Tall Tales, where it's a fun story to tell. So he takes the foxes, and it's very cinematic. He ties their tails together so they're going to scatter back and forth, and ties a torch, so they're all going to go scattered all about, and they're going to burn everything down. And then, again, you have the irony of what did the wife was threatened with being burned that we're going to burn your father's house down. And what does it ultimately lead to? And her house and her father's house is burned down. And so it's that kind of irony of the situation. Again, not good, not meant to be do this. We're not supposed to be imitating any of this. We're also just showing like the harshness of the land. It's kind of like when you see the Wild West stories and like the Indians are scalping the settlers and the settlers are scalping the Indians back, and it's all that. It's like, it's an interesting story. Again, you're not supposed to like, oh, I'm supposed to be like, no. Don't be like any of them. This is not a be like one of, no. We're all kind of bad here. Then the Philistines came up and encamped in Judah and made a raid on Lehi. The men of Judah said, "Why have you come up against us?" They said, "We have come up to bind Samson and to do to him what he did to us." Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Edom, and they said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then have you done to us?" He replied, "As they did to me, so I have done to them." Then they said to him, "We have come down to bind you so that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines." Samson answered them, "Swear to me that you yourselves will not attack me." They said to him, "No, we will only bind you and give you into their hands. We will not kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed on him. Remember, we see that happened when he fought the lion. And the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that has been caught fire, and the bonds melted off his hands. Then he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out and took it, and with it he killed 1,000 men. And Samson said, "What with a jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have slain 1,000 men." When he was finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone, and that place has been called Ramah-Lehi. So again, fun story to tell around a campfire. And then he took a jawbone and he killed 1,000 men. It's got that fun element to it. But when he was very thirsty, and he called to the Lord, saying, "You have granted this great victory by the hand of your servant. Am I now to die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" So God split open the hollow place that is at Lehi, and water came from it. Then he drank, his spirit returned, and he revived. Therefore it was named En-Hakkoi, which is in Lehi to this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines for 20 years. Okay, we'll stop there, because next is Samson and Delilah, and we'll hear the rest of that story with Samson. And it's we all know it, but it's still a good one. And we're coming closer to the end we still got a little ways to go for Judges. But yeah, so this is one of the other big stories. So we'll end there, and we'll continue with the story of Samson next week. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end, amen. Have a good night, everybody.